Welcome to the Chart of Truth Iceberg series, part 6. I know the title is going to say something different, but if this is your first time watching this series, this is going to be layer 6, part 1 of a 30-layer iceberg. This is going over everything from conspiracies to urban legends to everything in between. So if you haven't seen parts 1 through 5, go ahead and go watch those, but just note that part 1 is drastically different than the next 5 parts. And this is because I was a lot more focused on debunking everything that I talked about, as opposed to just giving and presenting all the information that I found on these topics. So if you end up not liking part 1, do not let that stop you from enjoying the rest of the series. There is a reason that part 5 of the entire thing has way more views and way more likes than the entirety of the series, and it's because I'm only getting better the more that I make these videos. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about before we actually go into the meat of this video is the fact that researching and finding the information for this stuff can be somewhat risky. And it's not because I'm going to be on some government watch list or whatever. It's mostly because I'm clicking through a ton of sketchy links and random obscure websites that I just don't have experience with. And that's where Atlas VPN comes in handy. Not only will it block malware, phishing attempts, and virus distributing sites, but it can also help stop third-party trackers from getting insights into your online activity. You'll even get notified if your information is leaked through a data breach, which is way too common nowadays. Keep your data safe and check the link in the description for an amazing deal from Atlas VPN. And if you're hearing this and telling yourself that you don't need one because you mostly use your computers, phones, and laptops for just fun movies and games, well, you might be interested in Atlas VPN as well. Well, I'm sure you guys have all heard the same spiel from other people, but you can get past all of those regional blocks from your favorite streaming services by using Atlas VPN. But it doesn't just bypass regional blocks from only streaming services. It's regional blocks from basically any website on the internet. So take control of your internet activity and grab the big deal that Atlas VPN has going on right now. You can get access to Atlas VPN Premium for just $1.83 per month, plus 3 months extra. And all of that with a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can protect your privacy and get all the benefits from Atlas VPN at this amazing low price. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure to check the link in the description, but you have to be quick because this is a limited time offer. Thank you to Atlas VPN for sponsoring part 6 of the Chart of Truth Iceberg. Now, without further ado, let's get into the first half of layer 6. I have decided to split layer 6 mostly in half, and this is because I've been upping the research. I've been trying to give not just 1 to 2 sentences or a paragraph of information for a lot of these things. I want to give a full-blown explanation of how these things came to be and why they're significant. So yeah, let's just get into it. Monsanto. Genetically modified crops are plants that have had their DNA modified. Monsanto is a huge company that produces these genetically modified seeds and crops. They're not only responsible for producing these crops, but they've also been a big part of huge controversies because of their stubborn and cruel approach to protecting what they believe is their product. You see, smaller farmers that are nowhere near the size of Monsanto have been sued for inappropriate use of Monsanto seeds. And most of the time, it's not even because the farmer intended to use Monsanto's products. Usually how it goes is a farmer will obtain their seeds from a local grain elevator and use them to grow whatever crop that they're wanting to grow. Seems relatively normal, but what ends up happening most of the time is some of these farmers are near other Monsanto farms. And because of natural winds coming through these farms, pollen from the Monsanto plants will fly from their field and seemingly contaminate the smaller farmers' crops. Because smaller farmers are simply doing their job and are unaware of the pollen contaminating their product, they'll go about business as usual. This means that they will take the contaminated plants and reharvest their seeds and plant them again for the next upcoming year. This is a relatively normal thing for farmers to do because obviously you want to reuse your product and get the most use out of it. But Monsanto will step in after they do this and sue them because the pollen from their genetically modified crops touched this smaller farmer's crop, which somehow leaves them within their full right to sue the farmer and not allow them to reharvest their own seeds that they purchased, planted, and grew themselves. So basically, farmers are just doing their job and Monsanto is suing them for doing their job. And as I said before, the worst part of this is that the farmers have no clue that they're using Monsanto seeds. They're just going to their local area and obtaining what they believe to be normal seeds, and then the pollen or something from the air contaminates them and gives Monsanto the right to come in and basically stop their production. And this is where the conspiracy side of things come in. So people already believe that Monsanto isn't just putting in helpful little chemicals to help the products grow. They think that they're poisoning us and that they're putting in stuff that will cause health problems such as birth defects, cancer, and all types of disorders. And there is this notion that Monsanto has a larger motive to control the world's food supply. And the reason people believe this is because of them suing these smaller farmers. They think that Monsanto is purposely placing their farms close to all of these local farmers so that they will happen to have the cross-pollination happen, and then it gives them the right to come in and sue them and also allow those crops to be seemingly poisoned by whatever chemicals Monsanto is using. And all of this is done with the intention of creating a global food monopoly, since they'd be able to stop other farms from producing products if this cross-pollination occurs. RPG insanity training. Role-playing games, otherwise known as RPGs, are innocent enough, which begs the question, why is it on this iceberg? There appears to be two theories out there in the wild. There is one more far-fetched theory that I heard on this podcast called the Grave Nugget, where these two guys talk about the RPG insanity training conspiracy. In that podcast, they explained that somehow the Yakuza owns companies like Nintendo and Sony, and that they force them to make these RPGs in such a way that it will create sleeper agents for their own nefarious use and purposes. The other theory is that the US government is creating RPG simulations to train soldiers for violent tactics. This seems simple enough on the surface, much like how you see people using driving simulations to practice driving. But in this example, some believe that the US government takes it a step further and think that the violent behavior in the simulations are done in such a way that will produce and encourage soldiers to behave more violently outside of combat, creating an army of extremely aggressive soldiers that are ready to drop at a moment's notice. Vimanas. Put simply, these are flying machines. But not just any flying machines, they are ancient flying machines. There are these two ancient Hindu texts known as the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. These ancient texts explain in detail not just the look, but the actual use of these machines. Now I'm just going to read aloud this excerpt that I found. So for those that want to fact check me on this, I believe that this excerpt is directly translated from the Ramayana by, I'm going to try and pronounce this, but Manmatha Nath Dut. I am so sorry if I mispronounced that, but this is a prolific translator of Hindu scriptures and writings. So this is the excerpt. The Pushpaka Vimana that resembles the sun and belongs to my brother was brought by the powerful Ravana. That aerial and excellent Vimana going everywhere at will, that chariot resembling a bright cloud in the sky, and the king Rama got in, and the excellent chariot at the command of the Ragira rose up in the higher atmosphere. So the picture being shown on screen is a recreation of that description. The line that should strike you as odd is the last bit, rose up into a higher atmosphere. This implies that the excellent chariot, as it's written, somehow rose into the sky, which has led many to believe that these Vimanas are actually ancient flying machines. North Korea equals Utopia. This is the belief that North Korea is actually a prosperous society that is run by a government that actually takes care of every single need of its citizens. This belief stems from people thinking that the US unjustly critiques North Korea in an effort to keep people from seeing the more socialist paradise that lies inside. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I was originally gonna talk about an entire thing, but I don't know what to believe anymore, dude. I really don't. I made a whole section about this in my Distributed Media Volume 3 that I just posted. So if you guys want to go watch that and watch that entire section, go check that out because it is very informative on these like TikToks that North Korea has been making that to me look like clear propaganda. But it also might be because I've been propagandized by the US. I don't even know what to believe anymore. I keep seeing posts from Reddit forums of people that have supposedly lived there and said like it's not that bad. The US makes it look way worse than it actually is. And I see just as many comments from the other side saying that people were tortured and killed and it's not all fun and games. I don't know what to believe, dude. There's no sources for this. I think the fact that there's no clear source indicating it is a little telling of what it is, but some people will tell you otherwise. So I don't know what to believe. Let me know your opinion on North Korea in the comments. I really don't know what to believe with this though. I want to believe that all the defectors are telling the truth. I just don't know, dude. I don't want to come on here and say a definitive opinion because I don't know. I haven't made my mind up about it. I want to believe North Korea is bad because I've seen so many defectors come and go, and I feel like the fact that you have defectors in the first place is pretty bad, but I don't know, man. So I'm just gonna go to the next one. So let me know your thoughts below, but let's go to the next thing. Law and font. The streets of Washington, D.C. have been known to be confusing to anyone that visits, with some people citing that the streets of Washington, D.C. must have been created to confuse incoming armies, because how could someone come up with such a convoluted structure? What if I told you that the streets of D.C. are actually designed that way because they are laid out for occult purposes? Pierre Charles L'Enfant is the original creator of the streets and plans involved in Washington, D.C., and people believe that L'Enfant is actually working for the Freemasons, which you guys should remember as part of an earlier conspiracy on this iceberg. And because people have linked L'Enfant to being involved with the Freemasons, it is believed that the odd structure of the streets is for Masonic and occult motives. If you remember from an earlier layer on the iceberg, I talked about sacred geometry, which states that shapes can have special powers and influence on the world. Some have pointed out that the map has strange similarities to satanic shapes such as pentagrams, and that L'Enfant utilized sacred geometry at the heart of the United States for, these weird, strange occult purposes. Codex Seraphinianus. An author by the name of Luigi Serafini created a book by the title of Codex Seraphinianus. It was first published in 1981, and it's gained a lot of notoriety for the surreal world that Serafini managed to create, all complete with his own language and his own alphabet. A popular theory explains that this book is not just any old book, and in fact it holds a hidden message within that has to be decrypted or decoded, and it will reveal the existence of a hidden world, with this hidden society's lifestyle and details all being hidden throughout the book. There has since emerged an almost cult-like following for this codex book, with people trying their best to decipher the language that is riddled within it. There's also another smaller theory that isn't really conspiracy-like. It leans more into the logical aspect of what this book might really be. Some choose to look at the book as a simple art piece, serving as an example of the exploration into the boundaries of the human imagination, possibly even being a work of science fiction. I could see either of these theories being true, because after seeing the book for myself, it is pretty weird and it is pretty odd with all of the hidden messages and whatnot, but I personally lean more towards the art piece side of things, but that's just because I have a lot of experience with art in my life and trying to analyze it, but I can most definitely see people believing the other theory as well. Before we go to the next one, I want to show you guys this, because obviously if you're watching this far into the video, you're obviously an iceberg enthusiast at the very least. From right now until the end of the month, if you subscribe to the Patreon at tier 2 or above, you will get this iceberg analog horror sticker. I will send this directly to your house along with a signed letter about why I started doing YouTube. And if you also subscribe to the Patreon, you'll also get 1 day early access to all the videos. So if you're watching this right now, a lot of people have already actually seen this video right before it came out. So if that describes you, thank you for being a Patreon member. And if it doesn't, what are you waiting for, man? Seeing as you've watched this far into the video, obviously you like this long form content, and there also is a lot of long form content on the Patreon. If you guys subscribe to the highest tier, there is a playlist full of behind the scenes videos where I just talk and talk and talk about basically how I made the videos. It's a very chill vibe as opposed to some of my other videos like Distributing Media, which is a little more serious. So if that interests you and you want to get the 1-day early access along with all the sneak peeks from my videos, go ahead and check out the Patreon after you're done watching this. Now let's get back to the video. Grand Unified Conspiracy Theory. What if every single major world event, from wars to revolutions to economic crisis, were actually orchestrated by the world's powerful elite? That is essentially what the core is of the Grand Unified Conspiracy Theory. However, there are a few different variations to this one. The first is, in order to establish complete control over the world, secret societies such as the Freemasons, the Illuminati, and even the Bilderberg Group are the ones orchestrating all of these catastrophes in order to advance their own personal agenda. The list of events are, but not limited to, the assassination of JFK, the sinking of the Titanic, the 9/11 attacks, and insert any world catastrophe here. Now you might just be wondering, like, what does this matter? Like, this is just me telling you a bunch of lists of conspiracy theories. The difference between this and a lot of other ones is that the entire thing is somehow connected with a ton of groups and ton of different secret groups from around the world also being interlinked into this. And it's not just a bunch of different separate conspiracy theories. They're all grand, unified together, and all have links to each other. Others think that mind control techniques such as subliminal messaging are being used, which could relate back to an earlier entry about media control. However, the most accepted and rather crazy version of this theory that I stumbled upon comes from a Reddit post with this huge image explaining the entire conspiracy. Basically, the post explains how an alliance of international bankers own the Federal Reserve, among other banks, and links to groups such as the FBI, CIA, and secret societies to some of the most famous conspiracies, such as Pizzagate, Bohemian Grove, and various well-known scandals. It's proposed that every single scandal, every single controversy, all of these conspiracies are thrown at us, not just the public, but also us who feed into it and want to read more into these conspiracies in order to distract us from what's really going on behind closed doors. If you want to check out the chart for yourself, I'll leave a link in the description below. Comic-Con Child Recruitment. This one is similar to the conspiracy surrounding the secret tunnels at Disneyland. This one claims that there are people that use places like Comic-Con as a way to traffic little kids. There's like two variations of the theory. There's the one that people just go to these places themselves outside of Comic-Con's recollection, not even knowing this happens, and that they use it as a way to do this exploitation, or that Comic-Con itself is made with the intent and purpose to do this nefarious action. The theory suggests that children are being targeted at these events and lured away by older individuals. This is Ray from the future, so I was checking over my sources and noticed that the article I referenced in this part was actually removed. Oddly enough, all the news sources for the story I mentioned here are just gone. I did, however, use an archive service known as LexisNexis, which verifies that the story at the very least was reported. I wanted to include this because I wanted people to know that I did find sources for this. They just don't seem to exist anymore. I still have no idea why it was taken down, but anyways, I'll let old Ray get back to you guys with the full scoop. There have been incidents in the past that have been reported in the news, such as a man in 2012 that tried luring away a 14-year-old girl away from the convention. The man was arrested, but he remained unnamed. However, with incidents like this happening at all, it's no wonder why people might have been led to believe that such a thing occurs at these conventions. Glacial Cosmogony. Otherwise known as the world ice theory, this one proposes that all the basic substances of the world and our universe are all made of giant chunks of ice. These chunks of ice were created from a gigantic star that happened to explode. And when those pieces flew off into the void, they completely froze in space, causing a ring of blocks to form our galaxy. This is all thought of by this man named Hans Habringer, who is very well known that his ideas were not based on any type of research at all. Usually at this point I'll give some evidence supporting the theory, but I don't really know if I can. I hinge a lot of my reputation on the fact that I try to present all the information that I find, and that's what I'm trying to do right now. This guy claims that he discovered glacial cosmogony through a series of visions that he had during the 1900s. So already there's no real scientific evidence or any evidence at all supporting this theory. To add insult to injury, when he saw that his pseudoscience wasn't garnering enough attention, he decided to double down and changed up his strategy to promote his new discovery as a cosmic truth, teaching it to people at universities and the general public. But somehow the second time around, it created a movement of sorts, which has led to the prevalence of the theory today. Lifetide. So in 1979, there was a book titled Biology of the Unconscious that was published by a British author known as Lyle Watson. The one big idea that people took away from the book was this idea of internal biological clocks, and the idea that we as all living organisms live by the same exact one, and that we're all interlinked. Basically, because we're all interlinked, we will then follow the same natural behaviors and natural rhythm that will influence and change the way that we act in our day-to-day lives. That's what Lifetide kind of started out as, but during the 1980s, when the book became a lot more popular, conspiracy theorists took this idea and ran with it. It has transformed into people believing that there is a secret society known as Lifetiders. Among believers in the Lifetider theory, it's heavily debated whether or not the Lifetider group is relatively new or if it's a relatively old group having been around for centuries. Nonetheless, it goes over the same exact idea that we've been over before with secret groups, manipulation, wanting power through economic and world control, and you guys have all heard this. Basically, people are saying that these Lifetiders are actually the people that are in control and not groups like the Illuminati or the government. Baltic Anomaly. In 2011, a Swedish diving team discovered a mysterious object in the Baltic Sea that has come to be known as the Baltic Anomaly. It gained popularity due to its resemblance to that of a UFO. This naturally caught the attention of researchers, conspiracy theorists, and UFO enthusiasts. The rock formation was found by a team known simply as Ocean X when they went to go search for treasure underneath the water and actually ended up spotting this image on their sonar. I feel like this goes without saying, but people have taken this object's existence or this image's existence as definitive proof that an alien spacecraft did in fact crash into the Baltic Sea. And more recently, in 2019, the same team that discovered it, Ocean X, actually decided to take a new investigation and go out to the same area to try and take another look at it. The results of their investigation have yet to be released, but who knows? Maybe the mystery behind the Baltic Anomaly has already been solved. Planned extinction. Planned extinction, otherwise known as ecological triage, is the idea that not all ecosystems and species are equally important. And in order to remedy the fact that we have a limited supply of resources and the demand for those resources are constantly going up, we should make the difficult decision to lower some species population in order to prioritize the conservation of the planet. Now, what I just explained is ecological triage, otherwise known as eco-triage. Now, people have taken this idea a little bit further and created what is now known as planned extinction. Essentially taking the same core idea of eco-triage and applying it to humans, stating that the world elite at any point could deem it necessary and make the difficult decision to basically decrease the population with people that they think are not as important as other people. In this case, the more important species would be the world elites and the rich and the powerful, and the less important species would be the common folk, the people who have no money and somehow have no importance to society. They would be able to do this by utilizing their powers and money in order to fund certain diseases such as COVID coming out of nowhere, or even using stuff like the genetically modified crops that we went over earlier to poison the public and lessen the population. All of this would be done in order to preserve the conservation of the planet, or at least what they think would be the conservation of the planet. That is all basically what the idea of planned extinction and ecological triage is. Artificial poisonous snow. There is this notion that snow is fake and artificially created by the government in order to poison us. This idea appears to have gained a ton of traction after a bunch of TikToks went viral showcasing people burning snow with a lighter and having it turn into this black substance. Now, despite what your common sense is telling you, this is actually science. What you're watching happen on screen is science related. This is not some kind of conspiracy or whatnot. I can see how it would be though, because when I saw this at first, I was also like, that's really weird. Shouldn't the snow melt? Why is it not melting? But apparently because snow is a natural insulator, it actually retains heat. When you burn it, you get this black substance. This is because snow is a really good insulation tool, being comprised of 90 to 95% air. And because of this, the heat transfer from the cold air outside of the snow layer to the inside is drastically slowed down, meaning it will take a lot longer than you would expect to actually melt an entire snowball in your hand. And that black substance isn't actually anything crazy. It's actually just soot from the lighter. If you guys have ever seen a picture of a chimney, or you have a chimney in your house, you'll notice that a lot of the times it gets really dirty with a bunch of black powder seemingly spread out all around it. All of that is known as soot. Not suit like a suit, it's soot like S-O-O-T, not S-U-I-T. And all of this black substance is produced due to incomplete combustion. So sorry to those that thought this was real. I could totally see why though, because even me watching it, when I watched it, I was like, dude, it's just snow. Like it should be super easy to melt that. But apparently it does require a lot more heat than you would expect to actually melt snow. It just looks easy to melt, probably because of cartoons like this, honestly.
Now I've got you, and the minute you're all melted, the hat will be mine.
King Babylon's world control. Babylon is an ancient city that is located in Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq. It's well known for being quite the influential city, particularly in the areas of law, architecture, and literature. There is one point of confusion that I ran into with this conspiracy, and it's the fact that there is no king of Babylon. However, there were many rulers of Babylon, with one of them being the most notable, who is Hammurabi, creating what is known as Hammurabi's Code, which was one of the first pieces of text that we ever seen created an actual cohesive law for the general public. All of what I'm about to say is just purely speculation on my part, because if you go on Google right now and type in King Babylon's world control, you're not going to get any notable responses, so this is just my best guess. It's important to note that Hammurabi's Code was very influential because it was the first list of clear rules and guidelines for the general public to follow. So much so that people believe that a lot of what he wrote back then is carried over in today's use. If not the actual law, is just the idea, the concept of creating general rules for the public to follow. And since at the very least a lot of Western societies still use some of the ideologies from it, it effectively means that the world is quite literally under the control of a past king of Babylon. This could also all be wrong. I'm no history expert by no means, so feel free to correct me in the comments. It could also be a number of other things, other conspiracies regarding not only, world control, but Babylon as a whole. This was just my best guess based on the information that I found. Depopulation funds. I think the best place to start with this one is to explain what depopulation means. So depopulation, if it wasn't already obvious enough, is the belief that any number of secret groups are working towards reducing the world's population. This could be done through various techniques that we've already gone over, such as the Monsanto conspiracy, using genetically modified crops to poison the world, or creating diseases such as COVID in order to spread and infect people. With those in mind, depopulation funds could refer to how rich elites are putting all of their money and resources into depopulation efforts, whether it's supporting groups like Monsanto or research groups that are looking into subtle ways to decrease the population. Holotropic Breathwork. Holotropic breathwork is a type of therapy that utilizes controlled but quick breathing techniques. If you watch TV or movies, you've probably seen at least one clip where a pregnant woman is on the table and breathing heavily like this. Holotropic breathwork is similar to this style of breathing, the quick in and out movements with your breaths, minus all of the panic and stress. People have reported experiencing altered states of consciousness while practicing these exercises, to the point that some people believe this breathing technique is beneficial and necessary in order to connect with your inner self, with the major goal of this framework aiming to help individuals explore and heal themselves, allowing them to access their unconscious mind and thoughts, and even encourage you to bring about stuff that you might have repressed from when you were a kid or undealt with trauma. The reason this lands itself on this list is because of the skepticism behind the concept, due to it lacking significant scientific evidence that it actually works. Hermeneutics. At its core, hermeneutics is essentially the study of interpretation. Specifically, interpretation in regards to understanding written or spoken language and figuring out what exactly they mean. To give an example of how you would basically use this process, let's say that you were a historian and you were looking at an old document from 1,000 years ago. Instead of interpreting it with your current state of mind, you would take in the historical and cultural context in which the document was produced. Basically, when you're reading old stuff, you should try reading it from the perspective of when it was created. This involves analyzing the language, the syntax, how any themes or motifs are expressed, and then compare that to a ton of other texts that were produced around the same exact time. And then lastly, you would obviously have to eject your own biases and assumptions as a consumer of the text in modern times in order to try and not let them affect your interpretation. This would all be done to hopefully give a more unbiased review of the information that you were given. I don't really know why this was on this iceberg, because it's not necessarily a conspiracy, it's an established way of interpreting text. I think it might be because there is an ongoing debate about the most effective and proper way to use this technique, specifically when it comes to interpreting the Bible. Because what ends up happening is a lot of people convince themselves that they understand hermeneutics and have applied it perfectly, and then they'll come out with these ridiculous claims saying that they've applied hermeneutics to this document and come out with this interpretation. And that happens a lot with the Bible, because a lot of the Bible, at least from what I've seen growing up as a Christian, is a lot of people just make their own interpretations of these stories and events in the Bible, which might be why we have so many conspiracies surrounding that text. That's just my 2 cents on the topic. That's just what I feel like this is on the iceberg for. Hempcrete. You've all heard of concrete, but what about hempcrete? Hempcrete is a building material similar to concrete that is made out of hemp herds, lime, and water. It's extremely lightweight, it has good insulation, it's environmentally friendly, and it's very energy efficient in regards to more traditional building materials. So it begs the question, why aren't we using hempcrete instead of concrete? If you asked this question years ago, you'd have been met with a ton of conspiracy theorists explaining that concrete manufacturers and big corporations are trying to keep us from having better and cheaper alternatives for profits. But the fact of the matter is, we are actually shifting towards using hempcrete instead. But it's important to note that this building material has not been fully explored yet. It's only recently been tinkered with to build big structures and homes. And contrary to popular belief, hempcrete is not nearly as strong when it comes to structural supports for larger buildings. And it's also not as resistant to water, which makes it basically unsuitable for a lot of applications that humans would use it for. In short, hempcrete is a fantastic alternative for some construction and some buildings, but it's not fully there yet, at least not to be implemented everywhere. Although as of recent times, it might be coming to a change as the world becomes more eco-friendly in its attempts to preserve the planet. Bogdanoff. This is a reference to the twins known as the Bogdanoff brothers, who have really messed up looking faces, looking very similar to alien-like creatures. Now the reason they look like this is because of a ton of botched plastic surgeries over the course of their lifetime. There's a ton of conspiracies of the Bogdanoff brothers, from them being aliens to being the actual world elites controlling everything, to just all around having a ton of power and influence over the entire world. But I'm like 99% sure that this is not an actual conspiracy and it's actually just a meme. Every thread that mentions someone talking or asking about a quick rundown on the Bogdanoff brothers is met with these exact same bullet points. And I mean that in the most honest way possible. There was like 3 separate posts that I found that had someone ask, can you guys give me a rundown on the Bogdanoff brothers? And they were met with the same long list of these same exact points about who and what they have power over. So it mostly just appears to be a 4chan meme that got out of control. And with that in mind, I'm just gonna move on to the next entry on the iceberg. Infrared laundry balls. So there does exist laundry balls that say they utilize infrared technology. Here's an example of a company and commercial that claims this.
The laundry ball is composed of 4 kinds of ceramics: infrared, alkaline, antibiotic, and anti-chlorine. There are also magnets attached that create a hexagonal magnetization which strengthens the effects of washing and sterilization. In conclusion, the physical integration of these elements inside the ball leave clothes clean, pure, and fresh after every wash.
Some people believe that these laundry balls actually do more than just clean your clothes, believing that the infrared in the product can actually have negative side effects on your overall health. However, the commercials and products that I've seen, they read more like snake oil salesman products more than an actual conspiracy. At least that's just what I've seen researching this topic. NEG Entropy. NEG Entropy stands for negative entropy. Now, I feel like before I explain this entire thing, I should establish essentially what entropy is, because negative entropy is almost like the exact opposite of what entropy is. From my understanding, entropy has to do with disorder and chaos, but not just simply disorder and chaos, but a way to measure disorder and chaos. Now, a wonderful example that I stumbled upon in my research is the same example I'm going to give everyone at home, because it was the only one that I feel like really sold the idea of entropy to me. For those that are curious, the source will be linked below and probably in the bottom right of the screen. But basically, imagine yourself at the beach. While you're on the beach, you sit down and you see a pile of sand in front of you. Now, you can take your hand and you can mess the pile of sand up any way you want, right? You can slap it around, throw more dirt on it. You can do whatever you want to that pile of sand, but no matter how many times you mess with it, it's probably going to end up still being a pile of sand. That pile of sand has very high entropy because it's so disorganized that the possibility of the world naturally creating it is super high. Now, in the same example, let's say that you brought one of those buckets to build a sandcastle. You get some sand in it and you put it down and you build a sandcastle right in front of you. Now, this sandcastle, if you went and hit it and you took some sand and threw it on it, or you just pushed it in some way, it would cease to exist. The sandcastle would no longer be a sandcastle. It'd be mush. It wouldn't be a sandcastle like it was before. This sandcastle has low entropy because it has a very low possibility of the world naturally creating it. In a perfect scenario, it could happen where the wind could naturally force the sand to maneuver in such a way that this exact sandcastle was created, but it's very, very low likelihood that that's going to happen, right? So it has low entropy. That is what entropy as a concept is, but it's not entirely what it means in terms of like science and in regards to this conspiracy. Entropy is typically brought up when talking about heat transfers and transfers of energy. An easy way for me to explain this is to look at your cell phone. You know, everyone has iPhones or something now. We all have iPhones or something, right? Now, when you guys charge your phone like I'm charging mine right now, your phone's not going to be at 100% every time you charge it. I don't know if this is only on iPhone, but on iPhone you can look at your battery health and it'll show you let me see if I can zoom in on this. It'll show you in plain black and white what your battery health is. So mine is at 80% capacity. Basically what this means is that my phone, no matter how much I want it to be at 100%, when I charge it and the bar is full, it's only going to be at 80% capacity. Now, this happens to everyone's phones. It's not just my phone. Everyone's phones does this. And the reason it does this is because entropy is a thing. So entropy in terms of this is the loss of that usable energy. When you charge your phone from the first time you get it, you're at 100% and 100% capacity, right? When you charge it again, it loses a little bit, and it keeps doing this gradually until you have 80% like my phone does. Now this energy isn't destroyed. We know that because of the laws of thermodynamics, but this energy isn't lost, it's just unavailable. And it's made unavailable due to inefficiencies in our technology, right? The battery isn't perfect, and my personal use of the battery isn't perfect, right? I let my phone die all the time and I don't charge it all the way through. Little inefficiencies lead to this energy just being unavailable for use. But what if each time you charge your phone, what if every single time you plugged it in, the efficiency and the battery level actually increased? Remember how I explained that entropy exists because of disorganization? Well, if you were able to create a product so organized and so incredibly efficient, like in the phone battery example, you could effectively create what's called negative entropy. The system could become so organized and efficient that it would actually increase the amount of usable energy over time instead of losing that energy over time. Now, if you take this idea and apply it to the real world, it might become apparent why it's on this iceberg. People have taken this idea of negative entropy really far and explaining that if you were able to achieve this, you would have the ability to effectively not lose any usable energy. That would mean that people like you and me, if we were able to figure out how to do it to ourselves, we would be able to do tasks like telekinesis or even levitate. Because if you were ever growing as a human being, your mind would reach a point where these things would be possible. Also, applying it not to just people, but to the earth, you could start seeing how crazy it would get with the amount of possible disasters and ways in which this idea could possibly end humanity. If you're gonna leave a like for anything, just leave it for that explanation of entropy and negative entropy, because that took me forever to understand. I had to watch like so many videos. I even listened to like a rap from a parody version of Stephen Hawking. I don't know if it's actually him. I'm pretty sure it's not, but I'm not even fully sure if I've got the point across. But this is a pretty abstract thought, so let me know if I missed something in the comments, because this one was really hard to understand. Inunaki Village. In the 1990s, a chilling urban legend spread throughout Japan about a remote village in the Fukuoka prefecture, and how this village actually cut itself off from the rest of the country. According to the tale, the residents of this mysterious settlement have no regards for any laws or customs of Japan, opting to create their own twisted code of conduct. They are known as the Inunaki. Obviously, that's where the name Inunaki Village comes from. Now, this fabled village is said to be located near Mount Inunaki, which looms over the surrounding landscape like a dark omen. The more modern take on this legend has to do with this tunnel. There are people claiming that a sign sits in front that reads, "The laws of Japan do not apply here," believing that the people of the Inunaki village have completely secluded themselves and are only surviving through their own means. Some theories propose that the Inunaki have maintained their isolation and genetic purity, which has allowed them to exist for such a long time, suggesting that they have evolved unique physical and behavioral characteristics. Now, minus that very last part about them having altered characteristics, this actually could be plausible because there does exist another society called the Sentinelese tribe. In the same vein, this group of people have lived on a remote part of the world and are known for not wanting to interact with other people. And they seem to be doing just fine without having any interaction from the outside world. However, this is just an urban legend, so despite the numerous amount of attempts to locate the village, no one has really been able to pinpoint the exact whereabouts of the Inunaki village. This legend hasn't really died down since either. It's actually become something of an icon, as it's been shown in a few pieces of popular media, such as a horror film named The Howling Village, which drew inspiration from this legend into its story, or how in 2016 an anime series titled The Lost Village came out. There's even a story by famous author Junji Ito based on the tunnel to the Inunaki village. Falun Gong. The Falun Gong is a spiritual practice that started in China in the 1990s. It quickly garnered a large following in the late 90s and actually managed to become somewhat of a spiritual movement. In its heyday, it's estimated that tens of millions of people were going around China and actively practicing Falun Gong. In fact, it grew so rapidly that it caught the attention of the ruling Chinese Communist Party, which viewed it as a threat to its current authority and ideological control. What ended up happening as a result was the entire practice was banned, with many Falun Gong followers being arrested, subjected to forced labor, or even tortured, as well as other forms of torment. There was even an entire propaganda campaign that was meant to demonize the practice as nothing more than an evil cult, which is most likely why it's received the reputation that it has today and why it's on this list. It's kind of sad because when I actually read about the practice, it's not really that intimidating, and when you really read into it, it's pretty lighthearted, with it being meant to teach principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Basically, it teaches a lot of things that are applicable in everyday life and actually beneficial to your overall mental health. Now, I will say it does lean towards the more conspiracy spiritual side of things, as the main goal of this practice is to attain a higher level of consciousness through spiritual enlightenment, which in turn would improve your physical and mental health. TOR owned by government. There's a popular conspiracy theory that TOR is owned and operated by the government. More specifically, that agencies like the CIA or NSA run the TOR network with the purpose of covert surveillance over the people that use it. Now, I want to correct what a lot of people think is true, and I'm doing this for your sake because a lot of people seem to think that there is government traffic on TOR and that means you can't use it without being tracked yourself. So to clear all the air behind this, and please, you will want to listen to this entire thing if you believe in this. So TOR was in fact created by government bodies. Particularly the US Navy is where the TOR network was created. Notice how I said network. That's because this logo, the TOR browser, is not the same thing as the TOR network. You might assume by reading this theory that TOR is owned by the government, that the government actually uses the TOR browser as a means to spy on every single person that downloads it. That is not the case at all. So what is true is that the government did in fact create the TOR network, and they created it as a way to protect government communications from being spied on. However, this does not mean that the government controls and monitors every single thing on the TOR network. Before the TOR browser was a thing, and before the TOR project came and released it to the public, the TOR network was accessible to everybody, but in order to get on it, you basically had to be a tech whiz and be able to code your own thing to be able to access it easily. So in short, it was not user-friendly or intuitive at all. You'd have to know a bunch of technical skills in order to get access to it, and this is why it was so amazing when the TOR browser project became so popular, because it was an intuitive and easy way to access the TOR network. And people just want to know, does the government use it? And the answer is yes, the government does in fact use the TOR network. Now, whether or not they use the TOR browser to access it, or they have their own thing that they use, I don't really know, but they do use the TOR network, and that's because it's an amazing tool that allows you internet privacy. So even if groups like the CIA are using it, them using it just shows how amazing TOR is at protecting people. Think about it. Why would the government use a terrible tool where the only purpose of using it is to protect your privacy? Why would they then go and use the same browser for their own purposes? It doesn't make any sense. This is Ray from the future. I just want to reiterate on what I said here because I did not get the point across when I was rewatching it. What I'm trying to say is, if the TOR browser is so bad at protecting your privacy and it allows you to be tracked so easily by the government, why would the government then go and use it? If the cybersecurity that protects your IP and stuff is so easily tracked, why would the government go and use the same tool when you could just as easily track them too? That's basically what I meant, so let's get back to OG Ray. This isn't to say there aren't ways of being tracked on the TOR network. There obviously are, as multiple people are tracked, not multiple people, thousands of millions of people are tracked every day on that network, but most of it's because of human error, whether it be you downloading the wrong file or clicking on a honeypot site. So there's one question left. If TOR was created by the government, but they don't maintain or control it, who does? And the answer to that's really simple. It's the TOR project, the members behind the TOR project. Now, to explain how this happened, essentially in 2004, the government was the only entity that was upholding and maintaining the TOR network, and they got tired of it. so they actually released it as open source. And then 2 years later in 2006, the TOR project officially began as a non-profit organization that was dedicated to the development and maintenance of the TOR anonymity network. The only reason I wanted to include this wasn't to be mean and like try and debunk this theory, because I think it's a crazy theory. I just think it's messed up that the TOR project members are not being in the limelight for this, for creating and maintaining such an amazing tool. I don't see why everyone's giving the government credit for this hard work when it's not even being done by them. We should be thanking the TOR project team for even releasing this to the public and actually maintaining this awesome thing. Just remember to browse at your own risk. Even when using like the VPN that I talked about in this video, like you're still at risk no matter what cybersecurity you get. And most of it comes from human error. So those of you that are going to get inspired and want to do your own deep web exploration after this, just be advised that it's not safe like the clear net is. Trilateral Commission. This group was founded in 1973 by the infamous David Rockefeller. The tri in Trilateral Commission comes from the fact that the group is aimed at cooperating between Japan, Western Europe, and North America. There's around 300 members that spread across North America, Western Europe, and Japan that all come together and share their insights on areas that they're influential in, most specifically in politics and academia. It's stated publicly by this commission that the goal of it is to promote cooperation and foster a more balanced global community. However, some have pinned this group with a ton of conspiracy theories, as they think that this group is the sole creator of a lot of them, with the most notable one being the New World Order conspiracy, believing that it's actually the Trilateral Commission that is enacting all of these little things behind the scene and really the puppeteer that's controlling the population. People believe that they are in fact the entity doing this and not other ones that have been explained in the past, such as like the Illuminati, and you guys know all the other groups obviously, but I digress. And there's a lot of other conspiracies that have been linked to them to the point that it's just gotten bland. So I'm just gonna go on to the next one. 24-hour year. This one's self-explanatory, but it's the notion that in 24 hours, we actually experience a full rotation around the sun. In my research, I found this concept known as the time cube, which is similar to the 24-hour year. Basically, it explains that every single day, we are experiencing not just one day, but 4 simultaneously happening days, each spanning the time equivalent of 6 hours. Which 6 times 4 equals 24. The reason I paired these up together is because they both essentially share the same core concept, which is the fact that we might have been lied to about what actually happens in any given 24-hour time period. Meat showers. So to my knowledge, this is an actual event that happened on March 3rd, 1876 in Olympia Springs, Kentucky. During this historic event, if you can call it that, chunks of meat rained down from the sky onto Olympia Springs, Kentucky. It's reported that areas spanning several acres were just covered in fresh meat. What's really disturbing about this is the fact that all the reports of the meat are all completely different. Some cooked and ate it, reporting that it's either deer or lamb. Some took it in for scientific testing and claimed that it was either from a human body or possibly a horse, with others stating that it was just simple beef and nothing more. The absolutely wide range of answers is not the only alarming thing about this incident, but the fact that we have no idea where the meat came from. A popular theory that emerged was the vulture theory. People actually think that a group of vultures just happened to fly over this area and regurgitate their meals while taking flight. But overall, this entire case was found to be inconclusive, so the answer as to how the meat showers even happened, it's still out there in the world. No one really knows what exactly happened that day in Kentucky. If you made it this far, then you made it to the end of the video, so pat yourself on the back. Now, honestly though, like, it's super cool to know that some people watch till the end. I have like my analytics and I can see that like most people don't watch like the whole video, but for those that do, thank you. Like, it's super cool knowing that people actually leave this on in the background or whatever and just consume the entire thing. Even if I'm just your background noise or whatever you listen to go to sleep, like, that's awesome too. I do the same thing with some of my favorite content creators, so it's nice to know that I am that content creator for some people. So look out for part 2 to this Iceberg coming out soon. Again, this is the 6th layer of 30. I only went through half of layer 6 because of the amount of information I found. I don't know if I'm going to be splitting up the other layers or not. It depends on how much information I find, but each layer is around like 40 to 50. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing parts or not. I don't want to, but this one I just had to because of time constraints and the fact that it's a lot it's a lot of work, so I just decided to cut it short. And before I end this off, I cannot end it without giving a humongous thanks to all of my Patreon members. Right now we have around 23 members on Patreon, with all of the tier 3 members being shown on screen. So if you've joined in the last like few days, weeks, or months, like, thank you so much to every single person that has joined. Super crazy to me. It's still crazy to me that people are actually supporting me. Like, it's so weird to me that I am putting out good enough content that people want to see me make more and are actually willing to pay to see me keep doing what I'm doing. So thank you so much for supporting the channel. Humongous thanks to each and every one of you. And keep in mind, every single one of these people who are tier 2 or above have, I don't know if you guys have received it or not, but I did mail out a bunch of letters. Obviously, I said the sticker thing earlier, but I mailed out all of that stuff. It ends April 30th, so if you want one of those, it is a limited time offer. Go ahead and check out the Patreon link below. You'll get 1 day early access as well as behind the scenes content, not just behind the scenes videos, but also just little sneak peeks of what I do when I record videos. So if you are interested in that, go check out the link to the Patreon below. Now, with all of that out of the way, I will see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching.